How you doing, folks? Welcome back to Run It By My Lawyer. I am super excited as always. Today we're going to talk about the search warrant issues relating to Donald Trump and what is some call the raid from the FBI at his residence in Florida, Mar-o-Lago. All right, and we'll go over kind of like what led up to it, how the procedures that happened, what was taken. Kind of like the aftermath of everything. So it's going to be a great episode, and you will definitely be an expert in what happened in terms of Donald Trump and the search warrant and what documents they got. All right, so enjoy the episode and let's rock. All right, so before we talk about Donald Trump, really quick, I did an episode on Deshaun Watson, the NFL player that got suspended for 6 weeks. And I'm happy to say that I did the video after he was suspended for 6 weeks, and I had said in his appeal, it was going to be more stringent because it was the appellate sort of arbitrator was selected by the NFL. And I think it was going to be a lot more strict than his initial ruling. And sure enough, they agreed to extend the suspension from 6 weeks to 11 weeks and add a $5 million fine. So it's a good video. I put the link below if you want to go back and watch that one, and the one on Twitter and Elon Musk. That is coming down the pipe soon. So if you want to be an expert in that field between that lawsuit, go check out that video as well. All right, we have a lot to go over today, so I want to get started. Okay. Now, I want to go over the background with the Donald Trump, because this is something that has never happened in the history of the United States, and it's likely to never happen again. I mean, this is crazy. The FBI went to his house. This is a former president of the United States of America. They went into his house and they took out, documents and boxes and stuff and photos, right? I mean, this is a criminal search warrant, all right, of a president of the United States. So it's obviously a very big deal. And there's been a lot of chatter in terms of like how it happened. It's politically motivated. It's not politically motivated. And look, I pride myself in being, I've taught law before, and as a kind of a lawyer, law professor, I love explaining kind of the legal specifics and how all of this broke down in terms of, what the federal judges did, what the FBI did, what kind of documents were filed in court, and what kind of rulings came out, that type of thing. So that my goal is for you to understand kind of like everything that happened from the legal aspect. And then, of course, from there, you can decide, right, that the justice system did this wrong, or that the justice system did it right. Donald Trump is a victim, or he's whatever, right? All of those conclusions are yours. I'm going to explain the legal breakdown here. So as you know, Donald Trump was the president from 2016 to 2020, right? He served a 1 year or a 4-year term as president. Now, there, toward the end of his presidency, things kind of, escalated, so to speak, right? And what happened kind of goes like this. Obviously he challenged the election results, and he made claims that there was, election irregularities and straight up election fraud, things like that, right? And the White House staff, said, and it was pretty clear, it's like he kind of packed late, meaning, like he kind of was, it's like a roommate you're trying to get rid of, I guess. I don't know. But he packed late, so there was a lot of kind of confusion about how he left. All right, and what happened was, according to the White House staff that stayed and all these other witnesses, they just said he kind of just boxed everything up and took it. Whereas like former presidents didn't do that. They left everything there in terms of like documents and paperwork and everything. Whereas he just boxed everything up and took it. This is the staff. The White House staff, not any sort of politicians or anything. All right. So then what happened was, after he left, the federal government, right, and there's the archive office. Like every time I hear that, I kind of chuckle. Like it sounds like the souvenir shop, right? The archivist at the White House. It sounds like it's like, oh man, this was the pen that was used. Blah blah blah. Oh, coincidentally, thank you, Mark. My friend Mark went to the White House and he got me this little pen from the gift shop at the White House or near the White House, right? That was a coincidence. Thanks, Mark, for the pen. So anyway, I always think of the archivist as kind of like collecting the pens and the souvenirs and, oh, this is the toilet paper Donald Trump used, right? No. So that's not what it is. It's more about the paperwork that goes there, the documents, if things are like kind of like the top secret documents that the president looks at or the briefings, like kind of like how it's handled, where it goes, if there's some letters that are like official state letters or letters, that are private between like the president and a head of another state or things like that. So they're in charge of kind of keeping all of that, right? So they were making complaints that Donald Trump took everything, all right? And so he left the office on January 20, 2021, all right? And the concern was there was a federal congressional act passed in 1978 called the Presidential Records Act. This is after Nixon, and the act was very clear, and it said anything that has to do with the government that's in the president's possession, that belongs to the federal government, not the president. That's the short version of what the Presidential Records Act says. And then there was allegations later of the Espionage Act in 1917. That was during the time that U.S. entered World War I, right? And that one just says kind of like anytime if someone has a top secret document or classified document, they have to kind of like run it through the correct channels, and not give it to other people or not have other people use it and things like that. All right. So those are the kind of like the laws that that the allegation is, what Donald Trump violated. OK, now, so he leaves in January 2021. In May 2021, the federal government sends Donald Trump. He's the former president, so he's not part of the federal government at that point. They sent him a letter, right? And the letter professionally said, "Give us our shit back," right? That was the professional. What I said was the unprofessional way of saying it, right? They said it the more professional way. Dear President Trump, when you left the office and you took these boxes and all that jazz, right? So that was May 2021. Now, for the rest of 2021, Donald Trump's lawyers and peeps, right? They worked with FBI and the White House staff to try to figure out what documents those were that he took and kind of get it back. All right. And in that time period, they located what they called, they marked as 15 boxes of presidential records and classified documents and, secret documents and things like that. So during the year 2021, that's what happened. So a lot of those documents went back to the White House, right? And all of that kind of happened in what we call in the law, like a kind of an amicable way, right? That they kind of like worked all of that out in an amicable, friendly way. Then after all that, so that was on January 2022. So the January of this year is when they got like 15 boxes back from Mar-a-Lago. All right. Mar-a-Lago, by the way, in Spanish means from the sea to the lake, right? Because the house is built on all of the, right by the water, and it adjoins the water in from the sea to the lake. And it was built, by the way, the cereal Post, the Post company. Those were the original owners and builders of Mar-a-Lago. And then through like a long and complicated process, Donald Trump bought it at a very good discount. Okay. So he bought it for $10 million. I think it's probably worth like $200 million now or something. Who knows what it's worth? Anyway, okay. So then comes the year 2022, this year, right? Throughout the year, there have been complaints or facts or evidence, whatever you want to call it. Maybe it's some sort of snitch in the Trump family that, may or may not have alerted the FBI. Who the heck knows? We don't know for sure yet, right? The bottom line, though, is the feds, they got wind that there's a lot more documents and, secret kind of like things at Donald Trump's residence. Okay. And it's not just that, there was some sort of snitch I was telling the federal government. It's also that, I mean, these documents and everything that goes through the White House are very well recorded in terms of like logged, and they know what paperwork goes everywhere, right? And they know like when it gets shredded or if it's supposed to get shredded or if it's supposed to be like, that's what the archivists do, right? Where it goes and anytime something's given to the president, especially if it's like a secret kind of memo or something, and didn't you get that memo? They log it, right? So in addition to somebody at the Trump's family or, from his team, like snitching him out or kind of saying that they got these documents, there was also like they noticed from their, paperwork. Isn't that great? The White House staff and FBI had paperwork that showed that paperwork was missing, right? So this is where it gets super hectic, all right? As if it didn't yet. So they built their case, the FBI and prosecutors and whatnot. Then in early August 2022, they went to a federal judge, okay? Judge Reinhardt, all right? And they go to this federal judge, and what they gave Judge Reinhardt is what's called an affidavit to obtain a search warrant, all right? And let me just, a little bit of history on Judge Reinhardt. He graduated law school, 1987. He went to University of Pennsylvania. Right after that, he worked for 6 years for the Department of Justice as an attorney. And of all places, he worked for what was called the Public Integrity Department, meaning like he worked in the Department of Justice in, keeping public officials and everything, keeping them accountable and whatnot. Then after that, he served for 11 years as a federal prosecutor in South Florida, okay? And there was there's some controversy about Judge Reinhardt, especially because he was a federal prosecutor when Jeffrey Epstein kind of, got a very lenient sentence originally, right? So, you could take that for what it is, so there is like some controversy around him, all right? So the bottom line though is, so they go to him, right? And they said that the FBI said to Judge Reinhardt in this kind of like affidavit, they lined out everything I'm kind of saying, something like, hey, there's these log records that show there's documents missing, and some of these documents are top secret. Some of them could be nuclear codes, or information like sensitive information about other leaders and our secret, operations abroad and things like that, right? So, and then they kind of showed maybe, here's like 2 snitches, informants that explain where these documents could be and where they are, and here's the log records, and here's sworn statements from different witnesses showing that that there was a lot more than 15 boxes of documents that was taken, so that's why there's like documents that are still missing and whatnot. So that one we'll call the affidavit, right? So that was presented to the judge, all in secret, okay? Because obviously it can't be public, because then, theoretically, like if it's a search warrant to go get someone's, stuff at their house or look for drugs or look for a murder weapon or whatever, you don't make that public, because then it could harm the investigation, right? So all of this was secretly done. And man, imagine what that judge went through. So he knew, he knew this was going to be some big stuff, right? Because in essence, what the FBI is asking the judge is, we want you to authorize us to search, so we could prove a crime. We could prove a crime, and at their house. That's the most the place that's most protected is somebody's house, right? We want to search the house of a former president of the United States. Okay, so the judge here looked at all of that evidence, right? And there was no defense, because this is all from, the prosecutor and the FBI. And the judge signed that, meaning the judge said, go for it. Okay. And it wasn't easy, but it came out. This is the warrant. Okay. So there was, hold on. I don't want to go too fast here. The affidavit is the documents to support obtaining a warrant, right? Then the warrant is what was signed, okay? So We have the, the prosecutor that submits it, and then here it is. This is what was eventually said. This is a photocopy. This is not the original warrant, okay? I don't want anyone to say I violated any sort of acts. Okay, this is just a photocopy. All right. So here it is. It's a search and seizure warrant, and it describes, and it has to be, it has to be described with what we call specificity in terms of what is going to be searched. And a search warrant, they could search someone's car, they could search someone's house, they could search an office, whatever. All right. Wire, phone lines and things like that. So this judge, here's his signature, Judge Reinhardt. He signs the warrant saying, yes, FBI, you have 2 weeks to search Mar-a-Lago. Okay. And he even it's lined out with specificity. There's 58 bedrooms, there's 33 bathrooms, 17 acres, it's kind of like specifying the residence. The locations to be searched include the 45 office. All right. I guess that's an office of that's Donald Trump's office. I guess there's a big sign that says 45 office, right? All storage rooms, and all other rooms or areas within the premises used or available to be used by the first lady. Okay, I see. The F POTUS is the former president of the United States. I thought the F was the first lady, but no, it's any within the premises used or available to be used by Donald Trump and his staff, and in which boxes or documents could be stored. Okay, so again, this is ginormous. So here's the warrant. Okay,
did you let them in the house? Warrant.
That's the warrant. You always want to ask for a warrant. Otherwise, they can't go into somebody's house, right? Unless you tell them. Sometimes the police will come to someone's house without a warrant. And what they do is they say, sir, we want to search your house. Please let us in so we can search your house. Then if the guy says, police could be very, encouraging, persuasive, right? And so a lot of times somebody say, oh, yeah, sure, come on in. Right. So they could search somebody's house if they have a warrant, or if somebody volunteers to let them in. And of course, that word let them in has been pretty loosely, defined in several cases. So anyway, so they get a warrant to search his house. Right. And they did that. They executed the warrant, meaning they fulfilled it. They went and searched the house and within the time frame allowed by the judge. Now, what happens then is that they found a lot of documents, all right? And it's very rare that the warrant comes out, but it was pretty clear that everybody was going crazy, right? So here's the warrant. And then they found a lot of stuff in Donald Trump's house, okay? And this one's a rare one to get. We got it, okay? The FBI and the United States federal prosecutors, anytime there's a search warrant, they have to kind of list what property was found, okay? And I've seen a lot of, this is like this inventory list of what they took in accordance with the search warrant, all right? So here we go. They listed all of this, right? Every single thing was listed, called the receipt for property, okay? Let's see. So what it says, description of items, documents, then it says, box labeled A14, box labeled A26, box labeled A43. So these were boxes that the FBI found in Mar-a-Lago pursuant to the search warrant that they executed. And they felt, that it was boxes that had these presidential records. Now they labeled it, A14, A26, okay, things like that. Just to have some sort of labeling system, all right, so they could document it. Then they found there was like a executive grant of clemency regarding Roger Stone. That was Donald Trump's friend. And there was, like an official paperwork that was signed and whatnot. They found that that was supposed to be part of the presidential records. There it gets dicey. There's a description of a set of documents that the FBI and federal prosecutor just termed information regarding the president of France, right? Leather-bound box of documents. And this is described a lot. Listen to this. They found files, all right, that was labeled by the, like the CIA or FBI or other, police agencies. And it was labeled top secret, okay? And they found these documents, various classified top secret labeled documents, right? They found binders of photos. We don't know exactly what those photos are, all right? More boxes, and then they just put like miscellaneous secret documents. That is everywhere. Then they say miscellaneous top secret documents, miscellaneous confidential documents. Those could be, there's some sources that say some of them are kind of like where our nuclear weapons are. And some of these top secret documents are things like, when other countries, like, if there's some sort of military movements or what they kind of gather about other countries' military, whatever, their weapons or whatever it is, right? Or maybe if they have, some sort of agents or spies in other countries or whatever, and the information they gathered. All right, so there's all these newspaper sources that are saying things like, all of these top secret documents are being taken, and so obviously it's, pretty important stuff. Okay, and then there's more, more kind of confidential documents. Obviously, they knew that this would be listed, right? So they wanted to make sure they didn't put exactly what those documents are. Okay, all right. So now what happens? Okay, when all of this went down, the media was going crazy. Republicans were going crazy. Democrats were going crazy. Just everyone's going crazy because this is just nuts. Okay, so then comes all these lawsuits, right? I could assure you, a lot of lawyers are making a lot of money over this. Okay, so in this criminal case, all right, and it's not that. In this criminal case, there hasn't been, and there may not be, who knows, like formal criminal charges. But it's a criminal investigation of the former president, right, and his family. All right. And so what happened after this, after they got all these documents, after they logged the inventory, there was some fighting, they released the inventory, they released the warrant and all of that, right? Now comes all these lawsuits. Okay, so some of the lawsuits were filed by the media companies, because what the media companies said is, we want to see the inventory list. They got it. We want to see the warrant. They got it, right? Then they said, we want to see the affidavit presented to the federal judge that, convinced him to sign the search warrant allowing the FBI to go to the president's house to search for stuff, right? They want to see that affidavit. The Department of Justice said no, because that affidavit may, tip people off. Even if particular names are redacted or something, it'll tip people off in terms of who are these confidential informants. It may tip people off in terms of who at the White House is, said certain things, and they may be, sought after by, people that don't like that. There was one guy, there was a report about one guy that went to the FBI field office in Cincinnati with weapons, and, people were very upset about this, right? So the Department of Justice does not want to release the paperwork that convinced the federal judge to sign this search warrant. But the beauty is, look at this. The New York Times filed its own kind of motion. And, you can call it a lawsuit, but it's kind of weird. I call it a lawsuit within a lawsuit, right? What could be more beautiful than that? Just so we don't have enough lawsuits, right? This is a lawsuit because the main case, right? The main criminal case is potentially the United States, the federal government against Donald Trump, right? Then you have kind of a lawsuit within that from the New York Times and CBS and cable news network, NBC, right? What is Times Publishing? Oh my God, Dow Jones Company. I don't know why Dow Jones one says the Federal Center for Government Accountability. That's like a private interest group. So you have all these other entities filing their own lawsuits within that lawsuit, right? Those lawsuits are basically saying, we want the affidavit, okay? Because, we live in America, darn it, right? We have free speech and we want to see the accountability of the government, and we want the affidavit. So they asked for it. Now, by the way, it takes notation here. Donald Trump did not formally, in terms of like in the legal paperwork, did not ask that becomes public. All right. And it might be the case that, I don't know. Who knows why he didn't ask for it through his lawyers? He did go on some like media channels or something saying, oh, release these records, right? But formally, he never made that request. So, I don't know. For whatever reason, okay? But it was done by all these companies, all right? So now we have then this like big lawsuit within the lawsuit over releasing this affidavit. And this is big because, like I said, that affidavit to get the warrant says who's the snitch, who said to the federal government there's still all this paperwork, including these classified documents and potential nuclear codes or whatever, right? Who was that snitch? Who at the White House saw this? How many documents were there? Why did the FBI think that, more was hidden than what they originally obtained in January of 2022? So all of that information is clearly information that would be what we call newsworthy. Newsworthy being like, we want to freaking know all of that, right? The federal government, the Department of Justice, is saying, no, that is all very classified. The beauty is then, my goodness, it's like such a, there's so much, what I have here, this is just a printout of the docket, okay? And there's all these law firms that are filing these motions, and they're from all over the country, they're coming in and filing these motions, okay? So Judge Reinhardt then, he obviously has this big dilemma. He's definitely earning his salary this month, right? He then calls in the lawyers for the Department of Justice, the lawyers for Donald Trump, if they want to be heard, and the lawyers for all these media companies. And there's like this big hearing, and the hearing over, do we release this affidavit to the public, or do we honor the Department of Justice's request to keep it confidential? So the Department of Justice says to the federal judge, we don't want to release it because of the things I said before. It may hurt national security. It may hurt our investigation. It's not relevant right now. There may not even be a criminal case, so it may be unwarranted, no pun intended, to release this paperwork right now, right? So that's the Department of Justice's position. The media company's position is, we have a freedom of speech right, freedom of the press. We need this information. The government is accountable, based on the information we get and how the people react to it, right? I'm getting a headache thinking about all that. No, not getting a headache. I love this stuff. Okay. Then the judge issued a ruling. Okay. Here's the ruling from Judge Reinhardt. He takes all of this into account, right? And then he publishes this order, okay? And that big oral argument and everything, based on that and based on all of these motions that all these different law firms filed for the media companies and for the Department of Justice. So here's a ruling about the affidavit. The judge looks at all of this, and then the judge in secret, I said it. This is the same judge that signed the affidavit, right? He then looks at all these arguments. He already saw the affidavit, and he takes the following position. The Department of Justice doesn't want this released. The media wants everything released without any redactions. That's always the request, right? So the judge takes kind of what I would call a middle of the road opinion. Okay, hold on. Let me make sure I say this right. My view is that, okay, so there's the Department of Justice. Let's say they're here, right? And then the media, they're here, what they want. It's on the opposite ends, right? There's the middle of the road. I think the middle of the road would have been something like, okay, why don't they publish this affidavit, but redact secret names, and redact very personal information. All right, that would be what I would call the middle of the road. The judge went a little bit more middle of that, the middle of the road, and toward the Department of Justice. What he said is this. He said, I got an idea. Why don't we do this? All right. And this is in this formal order. They never talk like I talk. The judge never says, okay, I got an idea. All right. No. In this formal order, the judge says the following. Despite the First Amendment right of access, a document can be sealed if there is a compelling government interest and the denial of access is narrowly tailored to serve that interest. All right. What that means is the government everybody has access to documents unless there's a compelling reason to keep those documents away from the public, and that the government like narrowly tailors how they keep it away from the government. Ultimately, the judge ruled, after weighing all of the relevant factors, I find that the government has met its burden of showing good cause, compelling interest that overrides any public interest in unsealing the full contents of the affidavit. So the judge ruled that the government does not have to release the full affidavit. What the judge ruled, God, the judges, they always like say, like I've heard judges say, oh, I'm going to make this ruling, but the following exceptions. And then he says the following exceptions. Then he says, and then the unless. So I call that the exceptions to the exceptions. So the judge ruled, you don't have to release affidavit. But, okay, what the judge said to the federal government goes like this. I'm going to give you the affidavit back, and I want you to take another look at it, like as if they haven't looked at it for like 5 million hours, right? I want you to take another look at it, and then I want you to redact as much as you can that will not interfere with the investigation and not release, confidential informants' names and things like that. And then after you redact all of that, I want you to come back so I could review it. And then I can make a decision based on whether or not I'm going to release that, that redacted version of the affidavit. So the judge, that's why I say he took the middle of the road of the middle of the road. So I guess you could say a quarter of the road. He did not rule the affidavit does not have to be disclosed at all. He ruled, but he didn't rule redact it. And I'll take your word for it that you redacted it correctly. He said to the federal government, Department of Justice, redact it, bring it back to me, and then I'll make another decision in terms of whether or not we're going to release the redacted affidavit. God, I love lawyers. Like, we're freaking fighting over all of this. Okay. Then, come on. Like, it can't just end there. We've only talked about several millions of dollars in legal work. It can't end there. Come on. This is all a lot, right? Now, just for the heck of it and for no reason other than because he's Donald Trump, instead of kind of filing a motion here in this criminal case, Donald Trump and his law firms, and his lawyers, they filed a whole different federal lawsuit over this. Okay. And that was filed yesterday, Monday, August 22. It drives me kind of nuts when this happens, and this happens a lot. There's like one lawsuit going on, then all of a sudden there's another lawsuit going on over basically the same things. Now, why do people do this? There's a lot of reasons. We call it venue shopping. Maybe like you don't like one judge, you file somewhere else, maybe you get a better judge, and maybe, blah, blah, blah. Now, Donald Trump, and I've said this in other podcasts, his mentor growing up was the late Roy Cohn lawyer. And one of Roy Cohen's tactics as an aggressive lawyer is he said, I never want to be the one getting sued. If I ever get sued, I want to sue them back for millions of dollars. I just want to go crazy. I always want to be on the plaintiff side, the aggressive side, and his position was that a lot of times that kind of bullying, so to speak, will get the other entities to kind of chill out. Right. And so this late attorney, that was Donald Trump's Donald Trump loved him when he was growing up, this lawyer. And as I recall, that lawyer represented Donald Trump's dad and stuff. That lawyer got disbarred. And when he was getting disbarred by the state of New York, he sued the Bar Association of New York. Right. So this is what Donald Trump does. OK. And hey, if in terms of lawyering, it works a lot. Here's Donald Trump's lawsuit against the federal government. Donald Trump's lawsuit, very, very lengthy, okay? And I'll give you the short version of a very, very lengthy lawsuit. And gosh, the Donald Trump hired, let's see, 1, 2, 3, at least 3 different law firms, okay, to do this lawsuit. The lawsuit basically says all of this is unfair. There's evidence that the federal government is just coming after me, like prosecuting me, because they don't want me to run for re-election. There's evidence that I was working with the FBI to give them this paperwork. They harassed me. They caused undue stress for our family. We were working with the federal government. Everything was fine. The FBI was just there a couple months ago, and we had given them access to everything. So, that here's another one. The government, this is a quote from the lawsuit. The government has long treated President Donald J. Trump unfairly. The FBI and DOJ have demonstrated a willingness to treat President Trump differently than any other citizen. 2 years of noisy Russian collusion investigations led to a special counsel's finding of biased FBI agents and officials. Story. Okay, so he's basically also suing the federal government. I mean, in his lawsuit against the federal government, he's basically saying the whole federal government is corrupt, right? And that they're after him, and that, every time they've gone after him, it's showed that he doesn't do anything wrong. So he's suing the federal government for millions of dollars, saying that they're unfairly harassing him, and things like that. Okay. The funny part about this lawsuit, it just started right yesterday, and there's already all these documents in that lawsuit. My favorite one is this, what's called the clerk's notice of filing deficiency. I'm going to tell you guys a funny story that happened to me when there's only one reason I don't like going to the federal court. Okay, in the California state court is kind of relaxed about, like rules about how paperwork have to be filed and what font is used and kind of like the naming of the paperwork. It's just kind of like, just get it in, and it's more substantive, I think, the state of California. The federal government, on the other hand, they're so freaking detailed about these weird rules. Just a side note, I had this case. It drove me nuts. It was an employment lawsuit case, right? And I filed it in the state court. The employer then removed it to the federal court. And gosh, look at this. This is the standing order. Okay, you're going to get a kick out of this. The standing order of Judge Wright, okay? In the federal district in California, the central district. Okay, where is it? Like, this would drive me crazy. What the judge said is anything that is filed has to be filed electronically, okay? Then, here's where it gets crazy. Counsel are ordered to deliver 2 copies of all documents filed electronically in this action to Chambers, that's the judge's office. For each document filed electronically, 1 copy shall be marked Chambers copy, and another copy shall be marked courtesy copy. The Chambers copy and courtesy copies are collectively referred to as courtesy copies. And then later it says, and it has to be there at 10 a.m. the next morning, okay? And then my favorite part about this, I had to read this like 4 times and figure it out. It says this: the courtesy copy and Chambers copy of all documents must be 3-hole punched, okay, at the left margin. This is an actual federal order. And then it has to be 3-hole punch at the left margin with oversized 1332 inch. How do you say that? That 1330 seconds inches, right? It's a fraction. All right. Like, I know, like 1/2, 1/3, 1/4. It has to be hole punch 1332 inch hole size. Okay. Here's where it gets funny. Not the standard 932 hole size. When I read that, because the federal court is crazy. If you do anything wrong, they'll reject everything and you'll get disbarred. I mean, maybe not disbarred, but you know what I'm saying, right? I had to figure this out. Apparently, all the 3-hole punchers we've all purchased, the hole size is 9 over 32 inches, right? So it's, what is that? A little bit less than half, a little bit more than a quarter. So if you get a very, very precise ruler, that's the hole size. This judge made it a federal rule that that whole size of the document, you already filed it electronically, right? Then you have to like have it in paper the next morning. The whole size has to be 1332. All right. Now, why do I say all this? There's so much more. Look at all these pages. There was another one about, after, it has to be typed in Microsoft Word or WordPerfect, right? Then the font size, if you use Times Roman, it can't be smaller than 14 point. If you use Courier, it can't be smaller than 12 point. Like, it was driving me nuts, right? All these like weird, here it is. Typeface shall comply with local rules. No, if Times Roman is used, the font size must be no less than 14. If Courier is used, the font size must be no less than 12, okay? I say all this, like, I feel like the federal judge, like, a lot of them could have been, like, really good English teachers, like all the essay rules. And the reason why I say this in Donald Trump's case, I don't blame the lawyers. When they filed the complaint, there was all of these deficiencies. And, all of these paperwork that were filed deficiently. And that was basically because they didn't like comply to all these rules. Like they always miss some. And I don't blame them because they could drive you nuts. Okay, now the aftermath. All right, what's going to happen, in September 2022 and, so on. My gut feeling as a lawyer, I've been practicing for 22 years, I think Donald Trump is, it's going to be a tough case for him. I think his federal case is going to be dismissed sooner or later because it's going to be tough for him to prove that the whole federal government is biased against him and they're after him. I just think it's going to be tough for him to prove. And by the way, FYI, he's making that claim where? In the federal government, right? He's going to a federal judge saying, hey, federal judge, your whole system is corrupt against me. Okay, that's going to be tough, And then he, they found these secret documents and Donald Trump cannot simply say, I declassified them because FYI, if they are declassified, that means all of these documents, like the information about the president of France, or if there is like information about other countries' military and whatnot, if they're truly declassified, they could be given to the public, right? So I don't think that is going to hold down the line. I think he's on the wrong side of this legal case, all right? And I think that the good news, though, for him is that I think they'll come up with a settlement, something so that he doesn't get punished because I think I don't think he's going to get like criminally prosecuted because I don't know. I don't think it rises to that level where they're going to want to do something like that. So I think in due course, all of this will be resolved friendly, but it's going to take a lot of months and a lot of time. But I don't think, mark my words, I don't think he's going to be criminally prosecuted. I'm positive he won't be found guilty of any crimes. And I think his civil case will be dismissed. And I think sooner or later, after all the records are given, then Donald Trump will like dismiss his claims and the federal government will say, all right, we cool now. We cool. All right. Speaking of cool, I love to hear from you. Please, send me an email. My phone number is 619-672-1741. I love hearing from you folks. All right. See you next week.